Okay, I think we're recording. Yep. Okay, great. I've got a dog between my legs.
I know. The dog, she's gone between us.
Oh, we're gonna have tippy taps in our recording, but it's so
I feel
adorable.
like, there's a breeze. Like, there's a tail wagging.
I'm getting snorts, sniffs. All right. So today's meme is an old one. You're probably going to make fun of me for how old it is, but one of those iconic Yahoo answers from back when Yahoo Answers was a thing was about how was babby formed? How was babby formed? And one of the
And that's a big part of the book.
One of the developments in this book is Vin asking, how is babby Koloss formed? How is babby Koloss? So
I mean, it's not just Finn, it's everybody, but
it's everybody, but she in particular, she gets the answer, I guess. So she asks human, how is babby Koloss formed? So hello and welcome to Cosmere Casual, your casual reader's guide for the Cosmere Curious. I'm your co-host and I guess Yahoo Answers user, I don't know, ancient relic of the internet, Nick Gorman.
And I'm your co-host, AJ Gorman. Hello, cousins.
Yeah, so today we're talking about the Hero of Ages, and this is our post-read episode. So spoilers for the first 3 Mistborn books, but we're going to steer away from anything that edges into its place in the larger Cosmere, anything going on in
Though there are a few things that explain the book, that are explained in this book, that do relate to the Cosmere, but they are also just to make sense of this book by itself. So
yeah,
we'll get a little bit into that.
Yeah. So I think the our purpose of our podcast is to be, a casual reader's guide. And there's a lot of things that all happen in the Sanderland for this book, right?
Mm-hmm. And the first time I read it, I did not understand a bit of it.
Right. And it's, so I think let's just...
Except that the first time, I think I did guess that Sazed was Hero of the Ages.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that I got.
Yeah.
So I missed everything else.
Yeah, but there's, like I said, there's a lot of things that, all come together, but if you aren't paying that close attention, or if you just don't understand something that he's trying to convey, the whole picture might be a little bit weird. So let's just kind of go through, what all is going on in that freaking climax, right? Besides just, whoa, epic. So throughout these last 2 books, people have been falling sick to the mists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they realize nearest to the end is that all of those people were allomancers. The mist was snapping at each of them, right?
Right. So the mists were actually trying to help.
I think it's more complicated than that, but I think we got to get into that in the next episode for like how it all works with the mists. I know it's kind of explained in the epigraphs here, but
the mists were part of preservation's plan.
Yes.
To help humans by snapping them.
By snapping any that were allomancers.
Yeah, they weren't supposed to be so severe that they were going to kill people, but
it was a risk that preservation was willing to take.
Well, I think Ruin had interfered and actually encouraged the mist.
Yes, and that's why they started coming during the day and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But about or exactly 1/16 of the people who were struck by the mists,
who went into the mists.
1/16 of people who went into the mists were snapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then 1/16 of those were sick for longer than the others. They were sick for 16 days or something like that, right?
Yeah, so we've got this repetition of
1/16. And why that is important, I think, is a different story. But it's a signal from preservation that there's something special going on here. And the key revelation was that those quote unquote Mistfallen, the ones that were sent away from Fadric City,
because they were getting picked on by the rest of the army,
right?
Yeah.
They were allomancers who could burn Atium, and so that was like, So that was one. It didn't seem all that. If you didn't know that was important, that was important. And then the other sort of piece that weaves together with that was that the Atium that was coming from the pits of Hatson was a physical manifestation of Ruin's power. So
it was his body.
Right. Yes. But if Ruin had been able to get a hold of the Atium stash, it would have somehow increased Ruin's strength relative to preservation, and would have, allowed Ruin to basically just end the world outright.
Yeah, so by having the Mistfallen contingent there, consuming the Atium.
Yes, it kept Ruin from getting a hold on it. It dispersed the power, such that it needed to,
and I mean, it's not like they ruined the power, or they didn't destroy the power for forever. That power will collect again, but it will take 1,000 years.
Or something like that. Yeah. So that was one of the big key
plot lines.
Yeah. Where different things came together. Another one was that anyone with a piece of metal embedded within them could not be trusted to be free from Ruin's influence. And throughout the book, we saw Ruin spike people without them knowing it, like Spook, Penrod, or the Citizen, whose name I actually forget, but the guy who's in charge at Urto.
Yep.
But it wasn't so explicit that Vin was spiked the same way, right?
Right.
Because that detail had been laid like all the way back in book 1, that, her mom had gone crazy and killed her little sister, and, the earring was somehow involved with it.
Yeah, and it's not explicitly spelled out, but all of the information is there in the book that Ruin had gotten access to the mind of Vin's mom because she had been mentally unstable, so
Yes.
it just gives Ruin a larger opening to get in there, and had kind of encouraged Vin's mom to spike her sister's power into Vin.
Right. And that
that is why she can
pierce the copper clouds.
Pierce the copper clouds, because she has that extra seeking ability.
She's a Mistborn in her own right, and she has
her sister's misting ability.
Yeah, which was bronze to seek out other Allomancers.
Yes.
So Spook, after heroically removing his own pewter spike and saving Urto from, certain demise, whatever, he sends a message to Luthadel with in a sheet written in metal. So it's invisible to Inquisitors, but not Preservation or Ruin, who, like we see when Vin ascends, anything that's metal is just blindingly light.
Well, no, Ruin can't read it, but
Right.
Marsh could.
Right.
Which is why Ruin made Marsh read it out loud.
Yes. But I think, did Marsh leave off the last line or something like that?
No, he actually read it.
Okay.
Because he was compelled. He didn't really have
Okay, gotcha.
He didn't have a choice.
But, so Ruin does get the message, but Marsh does as well. And it was, basically don't trust anyone with any metal, embedded in them. And Marsh receives the message, right? And he spent most of the book trying to break free out of Ruin's influence for long enough for him to kill himself, right? But, after he gets that message, he gets a plan that we don't, we the reader don't find out about until later. But Marsh finds out that he can build, he can distract Ruin by basically torturing people. And so Vin, Vin gets in a fight with Marsh, and he ends up basically torturing her. But then, right as, Ruin is...
Yeah, because he gets free from Ruin's influence while he's in a bloodlust.
Yes.
So he creates a bloodlust
I think
by beating Vin, but that gives him enough power to get the earring out of her ear.
I found the scene pretty disturbing, but it's like, oh man, this is really sadistic. It's not, not for me. But it is a key moment, because then he rips out her earring, which was her own hemalurgic spike. So then she is free from Ruin's influence, which means that she can take up the Shard of Preservation, and she absorbs the mists.
Yeah, so if you think back to all of the times in the book where Vin actually took up the mist, it was after her earring had been yanked out.
Yes. At the Final Empire, the Lord Ruler pulls out her ring with a giant steel push or whatever.
Yep, it goes right through her ear. Yep.
And in the Well of Ascension, she pulls it out because it starts burning, because again, it's so repulsed by Ruin's and Preservation's powers are so repulsed by each other, so she takes it out on her own. And then earlier on in this book, she removed it to use it as a bullet against Marsh, and then she draws on the mist then, but only in a limited way.
Right. So, I mean, Brandon is very methodical when he plans these books out. He had planned all 3 books out before he wrote a single page for book 1. So now that you kind of know, if you go back and read the books, you will definitely be able to, you'll be watching for, is her earring in? Is it out? Is it in?
Well, and the other thing that about her earring being in or out, that was, kind of a subtle thing, that it was a hemalurgic spike, was that the only time that she hears Reen's voice is when her earring is in. Mm-hmm. And that's really Ruin disguising himself as her brother.
Yep.
And trying to nudge her towards things that, that Ruin wants her to do. So, after Vin takes up the mists, she takes up the power of preservation. But, even with Ruin weakened by, not having access to the Atium, a big enough portion of Ruin's power, preservation, before Vin had taken up, had put, more preservation's power into people. So she was also, weakened as well. So she still can't really just outright, beat, Ruin. So she does a lot of the things that were similar to how the Lord Ruler made mistakes when he took up the power at the Well of Ascension.
Yeah, she fucks up.
Yeah, she fucks up a lot. She tries to move the world to...
she does move the world.
Well, yeah, I forget.
Oh, no. I think she does try to move. I think she does move the world.
Yeah, because that causes a tsunami.
Yeah.
And then she
closes all the ash mounts so that the sky clears, so then the sun's...
Right, but then the sun is too powerful.
Right.
And so then she spins the world really fast, so that way they're at night, so that way they don't all burn. But then, it's very cataclysmic, right? And that's and she's only opposed by Ruin if she tries to do something that's actually beneficial. Otherwise, Ruin just lets her do it. So that's why everything she does on a big grand scale fucks up everything worse, right?
Yeah, why Ruin doesn't prevent her, because she's just creating more chaos.
Yeah. So then going back to that first thing we talked about the using trying to they were the seers were all trying to use up the Atium as much as they could. Elend does 2 things at once. He gets a whole lot of Atium and Duralumin, and how he got the Duralumin was he was basically burning the mists because Vin was connected to him. And then he gets a big future sight out of that, where he can see, just like how normal Atium lets you look a little bit in the future. He's Paul Atreides for a second. He can see everything into the future.
I did not get far enough into those books.
Okay. And then the other thing he does is he dies.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. And so that, I guess, gives Vin the motivation that she doesn't really care if Ruin opposes her. She's going to metaphysically take out Ruin even if it kills her. And so that's what happens. So that means that Ruin is dead and Vin as preservation is dead.
So which means Vin is a vessel for the power of preservation.
Right.
There is also a vessel. There is a vessel for the power of Ruin.
And Sazed makes a note of that there's a person with red hair they'd never seen before, right?
Who appears next to Vin.
Yes.
So the 2 vessels of the 2 powers are dead.
Yep. And Sazed realizes that nobody else is going to come and save them. And I don't know how he knows how to do this, but he just takes the power of Ruin, black smokiness
in one hand
and preservation in the other, and combines them, and he ascends as both and leaves behind the contents of his copper mine.
Well, so this is the part that I hadn't really got until this reread. So the reason why him coming into these powers works for him is because as he's picking up these powers and his mind is expanding, he is actually dumping the information from his copper mines into his expanding brain. So he kind of has all of the human knowledge. That's the part that nobody else had when they took up the powers. Yeah. Because all of the information, like, humans had discovered. Nobody had it all together at once. Right. To be able to know how to affect and how to change things. Yeah. So that is why it worked out so well for Sazed, because he could dump all of the knowledge in as his brain was expanding. Yeah. And I didn't appreciate that until this reread. Yes. There's a few other things I didn't quite get until this reread about, Sazed ascending, that there are elements of it that are just like
everybody knows this in Mistborn era too. So, but I just like totally missed it the first 2 times I read this book. So, anywho, so I think that's kind of the climax in a nutshell.
Is that most of the major plots, threads?
Yeah, at least the ones that come into fruition all at the end that are, can be, if you missed, part of it, you probably got confused.
And we should probably say at this point that there is more to this story. It's from different perspectives.
Yeah.
And that's all in Mistborn's secret history.
Yep.
We're not going to get into that this episode, but we will probably be talking about that soon. Because there's more to know about the story. There's always another secret.
Oh yeah.
So we'll talk more about that later.
So what are some key, all right, so that's the climax. What are some of the other moments that you really liked or want to relish a little bit more?
Hold on. While we're talking about the ending.
Oh, okay.
Having just reread this.
Yeah.
Do you think Brando stuck the landing?
I think it's if I were going to say yes or no, I'd be like a soft yes, right? Like I think the absolute ending of this book, it may be like a 7 out of 10, right? In terms of bringing everything together. Some of the things, once Vin became incorporeal, right? I enjoyed her plot a little bit less then because...
Well, it was confusing, especially the first read.
Right. And usually Brando is pretty... Like how we've been set up for how magic system works in how magic systems work in the Cosmere is it's pretty hard magic. Like there are rules and they follow certain rules basically, right? And once she becomes incorporeal, well,
we don't really understand the rules.
We don't understand the rules. There might or might not be, but certainly the perception is when she first descends, she basically tries to go after Ruin. She just tries to oppose him, right? But, it's not really clear what the fuck that even means. And then also, she tries again after Elend dies, and she's successful doing the exact same thing, just with more gumption, right? And that's just like, if I hadn't been expecting such, rigid adherence to the rules, it might have worked a little bit better.
I was not bothered by that at all.
Oh, okay. Where I do think that he definitely stuck the landing is, okay, we got payoffs for details that, had been laid, 2 books ago at the beginning of this book. The long vision for details, wonderful. And I also thought the, tragic deaths of Vin and Elend, that made me, I really felt sad about that, but it also was bittersweet.
I don't know if you were supposed to feel just sad. Yeah, I thought it was supposed to be more of a bittersweet thing.
Yeah, I don't want to say I enjoyed it, but I clearly felt how he wanted us to feel, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that really worked. And I liked Sazed, ascending. I thought that was a great twist. How about you? How do you think about the sticking the landing?
I think he stuck the landing.
Okay.
Vin at the end after she ascends, that was a little pretty murky for me, but right at the end where we have that bittersweetness of Vin and Elend, dying, and the unexpected but well foreshadowed twist of Sazed taking up the powers.
Yeah.
That was very satisfying.
Yes.
And not necessarily I saw this from the beginning kind of a way.
Yeah. And I will say, we finally got that fucking Atium stash.
Yeah, finally. Took a long time.
Because that was the MacGuffin from the first book.
But at the same time, it's such a major plot thread. But as I was rereading these books, I was like, I don't actually remember where the stash was. I know we eventually found it, but I don't. Where was it again? Yeah. So on the reread, I was like, oh. We finally found it. I'm like, oh, well, that wasn't
yeah, because by the time they do find it,
that wasn't a satisfying hiding spot.
It was. I don't know.
It was fine, but it was just it wasn't just I can understand why I didn't remember where it was.
Yeah, yeah. Because by that point, there's bigger fish to fry. But then it is a key detail. But still, it's yeah. Anyway, so you wanted to talk about the beginning. You were telling me before we started recording.
I do, because I don't know. I thought it was a perfect epic beginning. I mean, this is wrapping up this is wrapping up the trilogy. So the very opening of scene of this is we've got kind of that lone samurai walking up to the gates of a town, kind of epic.
Yeah, when they know that the bad guys are coming. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and it's like we're still not like we did know that he became Mistborn at the end of the last book, but like we hadn't seen him come into his powers.
Yeah,
and we had kind of seen him come into his emperor. Like we watched him become more assertive over the second book, but like it's a whole new level on this opening scene of he's by himself taking charge. Like not taking no for an answer and not using violence either. He's just kind of using his demeanor to.
Well, he does eventually use violence
for
in that
for the
opening scene.
for the Koloss, but as far as walking up by himself and taking charge of the city, that's just a whole nother level that we didn't even see in the second book. Yeah. So I mean, that was pretty epic for me,
and it really does set the tone for the book pretty good.
Yeah,
right, because it's still bleak, but they're going to keep fighting in the face of overwhelming odds.
Yeah. And then there's the decision like to actually leave the walled city and like, no, we're going to go charge the Koloss now.
Yeah. And, never expect
and we're just with the other characters in the scene like, what?
Wait, are we red shirts? Yeah.
Like, what do you mean we're going to charge the Koloss?
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was just like it was a drum beat, just hit after hit after hit in that
it was a pretty
in those
good
opening
scene.
chapters.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and then you got the cinematic arrival of Vin dropping from the sky and then killing an Inquisitor.
Do you think she did the MCU hero landing, one leg out?
I think I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
I think she must have. I don't know if she did the head whip.
Oh.
But
yeah,
because I kind of feel like she would not look down when she was landing. She would just. But anyways, I thought it was epic. I thought it was a good, like one of the best intro and like one of his fastest intros.
Maybe.
Just wanted to take a moment to appreciate the opening of this book.
It was, it set the tone for the book very well. Although there's something you said there that like something I also wanted to talk about. I didn't notice how many parallels there were between the Lord Ruler and Vin and Elend.
They talked about the Lord Ruler and comparing them with Elend all the time.
Right, but I had interpreted that my first read through as basically, they're depressed teenagers who have entirely too much responsibility and they're looking at their failures and comparing them to the bad guy they overthrew. But like, especially in this book, they stopped thinking of the Lord Ruler as an evil person. Which I disagree with.
You may disagree, but that's how they didn't think of him as evil by the third book.
But it
at least not completely. They were thinking more about his motivations of saving the humans.
Right. They can forgive all the genocide. Which
okay, well, I believe Sazed explained this in the epigraphs, but the Lord Ruler had to contend with ruin whispering in his ear for 1,000 years.
Yep. Yep. No, I mean, I get it.
How well can you expect anybody to hold up?
Well,
not that it excuses it, but
I was about to say, not this.
I think there was a little bit more understanding that.
Yeah, I agree. I just. But some of the, going through this read through, there were one of the epigraphs mentioned how Rashek always wore black and white to demonstrate that he was
Lord Ruler.
Yeah, to demonstrate that he was a balance between preservation and ruin. And then in the chapter immediately after that epigraph, Vin shows up wearing all black and Elend is wearing all white. And it's like, there's the overt parallels drawn between them by the characters who might or might not have a swirl of feelings going on, but then there's also like intentional, things that Brando Sando as the author is trying to, draw our attention to in their parallels that I, maybe I'm just not that media literate, whatever. I didn't, catch all of this the first read through, but.
Yeah, no, I hadn't, I liked the image of them in black and white, but I hadn't drawn it back to the Lord Ruler's clothing. Yeah.
And then you talked about, the Lord Ruler was, in his early years, there was a line or two in the Final Empire about, he had crushed rebellions by himself. And that image came back to me, with Elend going to that town and
dealing with it as a lone.
Yeah, as a lone figure, right?
At least till Vin showed up.
Yep. And I thought thematically, taking a step back, there's a lot there's just so many parallels between, on a macro level between Ven and Elend and the Lord Ruler, where the Lord Ruler, as far as we've always seen, has always ruled with fear. But Elend tries democracy and then falls back to being a Lord Ruler stand-in. The Lord Ruler opposed Ruin the whole time. Vin initially releases Ruin and then ultimately kills him. The Lord Ruler effed up the world royally for the few hours that he held a sliver of preservation's power. Vin, similarly, almost kills everybody with the few minutes of that she held preservation's entire power. So there's, even below the obvious stuff, like, I'm not the heir of the survivor, I'm the heir of the Lord Ruler scene where Vin has confronting Yeoman.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more that I didn't necessarily always catch, but it's almost like like she is the fulfillment of, the Lord Ruler.
Yeah, and that's why I like rereading.
Yeah.
There are some people who are just like, won't reread, and I'm like, but it gets so much better.
There's, because you get an appreciation for those long details, right?
Mm-hmm. But going back to what you were saying about, you have what's going on with the characters, and then you have layered on top of, literary tools. Human was another one of those for me.
Yeah.
I mean, only in literature do you get this kind of perfect naming kind of situation.
Like, oh yes, he's the monster named Human.
Yes. Where, the author is just screaming at you.
Yeah. That the Koloss were once human and they want to be human again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was good.
Vin's always got to have, sidekick kind of,
I guess,
bigger. I mean,
yeah, and Sazed was off doing something else.
Sazed for the first book, and then you had Tensoon as Orser.
Yeah.
In the second book.
That's fair.
And then Human in this third book, which we didn't get a whole lot of Human. Like, it was really just the first half of the book. But I'm not sure if I fully believe that no one had really noticed how new Koloss are made. But I mean, I suppose if you were close enough, you were probably turned into a Koloss.
Yeah, I was about to say. Well, and I thought the Lord Ruler or his Inquisitors was the one who actually did the spiking. And then
had them.
Right. I don't know why I thought that though, now I'm thinking about it. But I thought it was a new thing I thought it was explained as a new thing that the Koloss were able to, spike humans and turn them into Koloss. That was an after.
So they had learned to reuse the spikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do remember them talking about that. I think that was in one of the epigraphs.
Yes. So
while we're on the epigraphs.
Okay.
One of the ways that you can tell early on that it's Sazed writing these epigraphs.
Well, if you're in the audiobook, it's that it uses Sazed's, that the Michael Kramer uses Sazed's narration voice. So like in the very first one, you're like, wait a minute. Anyway,
yeah.
That was what I hinted at in the last episode as a potential spoiler for anybody on the audiobook.
Right.
Go
but
on.
If you're just reading it,
Sazed
uses the phrase "I think" a lot.
I think.
And
I think is the most common one, but I feel like anytime he's saying something and then inserts in a positive, I am, unfortunately, the hero of ages. Vin wouldn't say that. That's not Vin's voice.
Right.
But that's, it's a hard thing to say. That's
so
a tone.
Sazed.
Yeah. Anyway.
So I think you had picked up that detail, and I hadn't picked up.
You
had told me about that.
Yeah, let's say not on the first read. Yeah, I was as surprised as anybody else.
On the first read.
I've got a kind of a long list of scenes that really, stuck out to me. I really, really like the scene where Elend is speaking to the Mist Spirit as the vessel of preservation is dying. I really like how they learn to communicate both ways, even though Elend is the only one able to speak to Lex, and anything tries to write in the ash is immediately corrupted by ruin. This comes up in a lot of the fiction and nonfiction that I read, wherein there's a chapter from Gödel Escher Bach, which is a 1977 nonfiction book, won the Pulitzer Prize. It's about a lot of things, from number theory to DNA to artificial intelligence. And one of the things it talks about is inferring a whole conversation from just one side. And so it's very much got echoes of this conversation. And it also comes up in the Raven Tower, where you can't always tell what the gods are saying, but you can ask yes or no questions and get a pretty good response. So the way Elend tries to get complicated information and boils it down to yes or no questions, so that way you can get a response. Choice.
It's not so much he's looking for responses, he's looking for a path forward.
Yes, but he knows the god has information, or he suspects, and he how can he get the information that they both want him to have?
Yeah, and I mean, I do appreciate how that kind of brings it back to Elend being a scholar. And he just wants to learn from the Mistborn. He's not like suspicious of it, like which
is interesting because he's definitely been stabbed by the same Mistspirit before.
Like there was just the scholar there really at that time.
Yeah.
And a man of desperation who's completely lost. But
yeah. So another scene that I really enjoyed, when Vin is held captive, Ruin gives this whole monologue about how all things must end, and but his monologue is it's well written. It's got a very strong vibe to it.
It's convincing.
He does not make the point he thinks he's trying to make, and I found that just so delicious. He's trying to say, I am inevitable, like Thanos. But to me as the reader, the message I get from it isn't that he doesn't actually need to destroy the world. Everything ends eventually, and it's just the nature of things, right? And so the picture I get of Ruin, who's so eager to destroy everything, is not, hey, this is the natural course of everything. It seems more to me like he's, the immature, hungry kid who, gets to school with a full lunchbox and immediately digs into everything. Not like we know any 3-year-olds like that.
Yeah.
But then, eats up everything as soon as he gets to school, and then, has nothing the rest of the day. It strikes to me that Ruin has no self-discipline, no self-control, which plays into Marsh's ability to, get Vin Spike out of her. And it's just a subtle clue, right? It's so in character.
So subtle that I just did not.
But it was so delicious. I like that.
I don't know. You and Vin got something more out of that conversation.
Well, because even Vin notes, it's like something's not right with his reasoning there, right? And she's not Elend. She's not a scholar. She didn't.
I just want the world to end as well. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. My turn for a favorite scene.
Yeah.
So the town, which to me is just just a vomit of vowels.
Urto?
Sure.
Because it's probably not Fadrex.
No, Fadrex I can say.
Okay. But is Urto?
Sure. I refuse.
The City.
Just the U city, because it's like whatever. The city that starts with U.
The Citizen's Place.
Yes. The Spook Place.
Spooky. Ooh.
Anyways, I thought the imagery was great for that city. Just these large canals that are just empty, and everybody is just hanging around in those huge canals with like the sky blocked off.
Yeah, and the big wooden mansions that get burned down.
Yeah, and I mean, and everybody like wearing the same kind of drab clothing, except for if you're part of the government. I don't know. I thought, a lot of authors may just like, no, I set up this dystopian world, like there's ash falling from the sky and like whatever, and not kind of create these different places. So I really appreciated having kind of this new landscape that was still dystopian, but a different landscape from the previous books.
Yeah,
because Fadrex City did feel a lot like,
Well, it didn't feel quite as much as Luthadel. It felt like Luthadel light.
Yes, but still, in the image of Luthadel, whereas the throw up of letters, throw up of owls, felt completely different.
Yes. Yeah, and I think I agree with that. The plot line in Urto reminded me very much of Animal Farm, especially with the citizen.
Facebook?
What? Animal Farm?
Oh, you're talking about the meat. Wait, what Animal Farm? Oh, the political thing.
I was about to say the George Orwell book, metaphor for communism.
Yeah. Okay.
Where the pigs overthrow.
I don't know. My mind went to that stupid game on Facebook.
Farmville?
Sure. I never played it. I did read Animal Farm. It was a while ago. I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I should have.
2 legs evil, but then by the end of the book, it's 4 legs good, 2 legs better, and the pigs have become the humans that they overthrew. Anyway, it's about how
Wow, you can sum up that book in 2 sentences, and it took you a half an hour to get through Mistborn recap.
To be fair, Animal Farm is very short. And there's only like one metaphor it's trying to go through, and it's going through it very thoroughly.
Fair.
Anyway.
What were we talking about?
You liked the imagery of Urto. It was such a different vibe from everything else, and you liked that.
Yeah, and then you have at the end the epic kind of... Everything about this 3rd book is epic.
Yes.
And then you have the rush of water to fill the canals at the end.
Yeah, I liked... there was a meme I was going to open with that you thought had too much explanation involved.
Oh, please. Explain it now so I don't have to hear about your regret later.
There's a meme from Breaking Bad, Walter White sitting in a car seeing, Hank spring a trap or whatever. I haven't actually seen this show. And it's, the meme here is that you, the reader, are, trapped in the car looking at Spook, and you're learning about hemalurgy as the reader, and you're just like, no, Spook, that's not Kelsier, no. Anyway.
I wasn't screaming that because I didn't realize that wasn't Kelsier. I even forgot, even though I've reread this story multiple times. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense.
Well, and especially, there were a few times that stuck out to me, not just in Urto, but like where hero worship of Kelsier is intensifying and people are forgetting what he actually would preach about and talk about.
But at the same time, we didn't actually hear that many speeches from him in Final Empire.
Listen, Demo has a scene where, and I might be paraphrasing, but I've got it in quotes in my notes. If you don't really believe in the survivor, I don't think he would want you speaking in his name, talking to Elend about, whatever. But my brother in survivorism, Kelsier was a big fan of lying as long as it lets you live another day, And there was a scene where Spook was trying to, free an Allomancer, trying to free a child, from the burning building. Mm-hmm. And the vision of Kelsier says, basically says, don't worry about those guards. And it's like, that's not Kelsier. Kelsier would be like, yeah, kill the guards too. They're on the wrong side. They need to die.
Yeah, Kelsier is not the best person to look up to.
Right. But
so it's pretty concerning to.
But like I said, it's just even the lack of bloodthirstiness Ruin was a clue that it wasn't really Kelsier. And it's because Ruin had plans, for the guards. He wanted to actually make a real he wanted to make the sides more evenly matched. So that way everything, it was a bloody bloodbath rather than just one-sided. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
But let's talk a little bit more about Spook. Because I really like Spook's plot line in this, because as you were saying, we're like yelling at Spook like, hey, you got a spike in you, like,
but he doesn't know that means anything,
right? And some savvy people will be like, that's not really Kelsier, that's Ruin.
Yeah.
And I find it really satisfying that Brandon actually gives us those moments in his narratives where like the characters actually listen to us screaming at them.
Yeah.
It happens a couple times in a couple of his books. I'm rereading Words of Radiance, and it happens.
But we're not having spoilers.
I'm not going into it. I'm just saying that he does this a couple times. There's one example in Words of Radiance and one here in that Spook does realize that he is being manipulated, mm-hmm. and that he's spiked.
Yeah.
So
the spike had something to do with it. Yeah.
Right. So and then he actually pulls out the spike and doesn't kill the citizen and saves the citizen because he gets the spike out of the citizen.
Yeah.
So, but it also doesn't ruin the story. Because I feel like a lot of the times, like, authors won't do that because they don't know how to accomplish that without ruining the story.
I'm sorry. Are we not gonna like revel in your pun a little bit?
because I'm using the word ruin.
And you've been speaking a little bit too loud. You get a little too excited.
It's an exciting book.
I know, but you just woke up our
Which
toddler.
is kind of funny because I don't actually like this book. This is not my favorite. To me, this is there's too much going on in this book to be an enjoyable read.
I mean, it's pretty good.
I mean, it's a good read, but like there's too much stress for me in this book.
Yeah. There were a few scenes that I found were a little outrageous. And it's where I completely, I need to remind myself that Elend is not a perfect person. And in particular, one of them was Elend mentioned about Kelsier. What if he'd been properly beaten as a child? He would have always been a Mistborn. He could have saved his wife. And I'm just like...
That's kind of mean.
Yeah, no, don't beat your children. Like, don't, that... And it's... And I don't think Brando Sando's really endorsing that. I've got enough media literacy to know that. But it's... the incentives in this world are a little bit perverse, where, like, yes, there is a potential for, getting great power at the cost of, literally abusing your children, right? And I found it outrageous, and I was just like, I was repulsed by it. But I think it's also, they're in a desperate situation. They need power however they can get it.
Yeah.
Let's see, are there any other really key things that stood out?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about the Kandra at all. I know that for you don't look forward to the Tensoon chapters. I, being Cosmere aware, really like the Tensoon chapters.
Yeah.
I think Tensoon chapters and then the Marsh chapters are the toughest to get through. The Marsh chapters are very short, and they're mostly there to just remind you that Marsh is still around.
Yes, and I think they also provide a lot of insight into how hemalurgy works early on in the book. So that way it provides a little bit of the dramatic irony for the reader to be like, oh no, Spook has been spiked, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Ruin controls, okay. So, yeah, I don't know. Everything I got to say about the Kandra is a little bit drier.
Well,
maybe you could explain the Kandra.
Yeah, let me just say some things out loud because it's hard to put it together sometimes if you haven't reread this a million times. So the Kandra were created by the Lord Ruler. They were the third of the creatures that he made during his brief time taking up the power of preservation.
The other ones were the Koloss and the Inquisitors.
Yeah, and the Inquisitors obviously have like 1 million spikes that you can put in them. The Koloss only had 5 spikes, and then the Kandra only needed 2 for sentience. But that also gave them more freedom from ruin than the other creatures. So their whole kind of gambit in life was to do whatever they can to collect the Atium. So the whole reason that they went outside into the human world and took up contracts is that they demanded to be paid in Atium.
Yep.
So every time they went out on a contract, it was gaining more Atium. And that was kind of the whole central purpose to their society, was to collect the Atium.
Well, there's another central purpose where the first generation of Kandra were Feruchemists who joined Rashek in the original journey to the Well of Ascension.
Mm-hmm.
And Lord Ruler didn't want anybody who could eventually challenge his power.
So he wanted to be the only Feruchemist.
He wanted to be the only Feruchemist, and he wanted to tightly control who had access to allomancy through, basically eugenics program. And so his friends who were Feruchemists were given, were given an exchange where they could become immortal Kandra in exchange for their Feruchemy.
But
and that's the first generation.
Those packmen, those terracemen, were also speaking for all of the world's current Feruchemists.
Yeah.
So whether they, wanted to be or not, they were, the Lord Ruler took them as representatives. So they said yes. So the Lord Ruler changed all of the world's current Feruchemists into mist wraiths, and then spiked his fellow packmen back so that they could get their sentience back.
Right. So a mist wraith and a Kandra are the same thing, except a Kandra has the spikes to give it awareness and sentience. Yeah.
So when the Kandra talk about new generations, they are collecting mist wraiths
and putting
spikes into them.
Yep. And those spikes And those spikes come in 4 varieties. There's awareness from tin, which is very similar to constantly burning tin at a low level. There's potency like pewter, but lesser. And there's the blessing of presence, which was mental capability. So the way it was explained, I think, is they had better memories. They were resistant to madness, and they had better focus. They didn't get distracted as easy. And then there was the blessing of stability, which was not used. I don't think we even see it, included on. I don't think we see any Kandra with it on screen, except it's just mentioned as. Oh yeah, and there's another one that was rarely used, and it's emotional fortitude or resistance to emotional allomancy, which
kind of counterintuitive.
Which
what the Lord Ruler wanted to control them by, so I don't think
exactly.
They
so that's
gave that out.
That's the in-universe reason for why there are fewer blessings of stability.
And just also mention Kandra do grow slowly, so it takes many years once after the myth rates are spiked to become a fully functioning Kandra. And the only reason why I want to kind of note that is Tensoon kind of only trained one child Kandra to become a full adult, and that is Milan. I never really understood that until this reread. So because Kandra don't really procreate in the same way, you can kind of think of Tensoon as Milan's father. The other thing about the relationship is that Milan kind of idolizes Tensoon, and it borders on kind of a romantic crush.
Well, considering what you just said about him being like her dad, that's but yeah, no, I get it. The other, I think, big thing that we really learn about in this book in Kandra society is we learn a little bit more about the first contract, the one on which other Kandra contracts are modeled. And they're dedicated to the Lord Ruler. They need to, above all else, safeguard the Atium stash and get more. The contract, which we don't actually know what the whole thing is, but it includes some rights, because there's a mention about being able to plead their case to the first generation if they're ever on trial, like Tensoon is. And I think and they're not allowed to murder humans. But the last one, and most important to the plot of this book, is the resolution, which is that all Kandra need to remove their spikes if and when Ruin tries to take control of them. And when Ruin tries to get Tensoon to attack Sazed, they all remove their spikes and become Mistwraiths, except for some from the second generation who want to hold on to power, but then...
Well, I think because Ruin already had control of them.
Yeah.
Had already taken control too much.
Yeah, but so there was, that took away tools from Ruin that he'd been planning to count on, right? So then the humans are able to, basically fend the rest of the Kandra off.
Yeah. No, yep. I mean, there were a lot. There was a lot of more thinking for the Lord Ruler.
Yeah. So we just talked about how to make new Kandra, just to check off the box. I know we talked about this a few times. The way Human puts it is new Koloss come from us. Right. Yeah. So yes, talking about Koloss. They are made by flaying the skin off a dying Koloss and either taking the 4 spikes within, from that Koloss to kill 4 humans with an iron spike through the heart, and then placing those into a 5th person, or by using new spikes, which, so a Koloss is super strong because of that, iron spike through 4 other people. But having that many spikes and the location of the spikes, is what, turns them into, hemalurgic constructs rather than, humans. One of the things I noticed in this reread was that the chapter 43 epigraph in particular explains that one of the reasons why getting a spike can turn people into Koloss versus Inquisitors is the location of the spikes.
Location and type of metal is very important.
Yes.
In hemalurgy.
Yes. But so if you're like, well, wait a minute, why is it an Inquisitor and why is it a Koloss? Well, it has to do with the locations of the spikes. Yeah, is there anything else?
Yeah, I think the one kind of overall thing to land on at the end here is that we were all so focused on Vin and Elend to an extent, where it's really kind of says it as almost the true main character of the trilogy. I know that's kind of a bold statement, But I think it's just a time that we remember that, everyone is the main character of their own story.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And while the story may kind of, in the end, focus on Sazed's perspective was not the best perspective to view the story from.
Well, and I think,
not at all points of the story anyways.
Sazed is the one who survives and who's around to tell the story, at the very end of the book. But to me, the events are driven by Vin and Elend, and this is their story, even if Sazed, becomes the hero of ages at the end.
Yeah. True, yes, but the stories are so interwoven.
Yes.
It's not often, I feel like we're getting better about that as like fantasy genre, but I feel like in previous eras of fantasy, it was more, we're focused on this one character and their beginning to end story.
Yeah.
Where the world's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And so should our fantasy worlds.
Like you look at Star Wars, it's the story of Luke Skywalker, at least the original trilogy, right?
Right.
And the prequel trilogy, it's the story of Anakin. There's other characters. There's Han Solo, there's Obi-Wan, but it's their relationship to the main character that really is why they're important.
Yeah, and I do appreciate, now that Star Wars is doing a lot more stuff outside of that story.
I don't know if I want to talk about that.
All right. But I'm just saying, they are getting into some more of the backstories. So I feel like we are evolving as a genre and media.
I like how you're saying we don't put out any sci-fi.
No, we don't put it. But as consumers,
It's
I
true.
think people are starting to realize that we as consumers are interested in those kind of more complicated stories and kind of background, not background, but
I'm trying to think. What's the there's a word for it where you've got a whole bunch of main characters. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it.
Poly something?
No, it's a ensemble.
Yeah.
Where you've got an ensemble cast as the main characters rather than one real lead.
Yeah. And I think in previous eras, people were like, no, it's too complicated. People get lost. And like, definitely with like Game of Thrones, which was an ensemble cast, like there were a lot of complaints about
and I think that,
trying to remember all the names and characters and what they're all doing and their own motivations. But, I mean, George R. R. Martin did take that to a bit of an extreme.
I disagree, but that's okay. But I guess just to take that point again, it's like, he
even lost track of when he killed off characters. He would write whole chapters and then like he would send them off to his pre-readers and they're like, you killed this character off. Like,
but there is a market, there's an audience who loves those kinds of things, and I'm in that audience.
Okay.
Right? Who loves the detailed stuff, who loves like, finding a detail that was, oh shit, this was, foreshadowed or, real foreshadowing or not. Like, oh yeah.
At the same time though, like I got so annoyed with reading the Cosmere that I said we need to start a podcast
to explain it.
To explain it, and so that I can force myself to study it because it is so freaking complicated. Like worth the effort for sure.
The payoffs are pretty good,
but it's also not like a casual. It can be a casual read, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. I've got one other key moment or takeaway or something I wanted to talk about, but after that I've pretty much all done. I guess, is there anything else you want to talk about?
We can save it for the next episode.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Because I've got some stuff to say about Savantism, which is how Spook was.
Yeah, go for it.
And I guess I've got two things. So Savantism is hard to discuss without getting to more Cosmere theory, but this is the most we've seen of it on screen, and it's what happens to Spook is that he uses his tin so much it changes who he is as a person. So he became extra at burning tin, where he expanded his power than he had as a normal tin eye, as he had more than what he had before. But rather than just being like an extra strong tin eye, like if he were had taken like Elend basically, it was even more than that, but it had costs associated with it, where the normal
he burned it nonstop.
Yes. Yeah. And the normal drawback of tin is that it's that your senses are all amplified, and so loud sounds are used to hurt Vin in earlier books, so that's even more so. And then B, the other downside was that when he wasn't burning tin, he was left numb and he couldn't feel anything,
which was
he uses
really helpful.
He uses to his advantage, but it's I don't know. It's something. I'm having a hard time putting the words, but like it makes you understand that there are drawbacks to these magic. Like they're not all good.
They're not all good, and Brandon really likes to explore the limits of his magic systems. He likes to set up rules and then explore, like push those limits to the extreme. That is a common theme, and you're going to see more of that in Era 2, and I'm assuming more in Era 3 and 4.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's the longer these books go on, we realize exactly what limits, he's put in and where he can push them. Yeah.
All right, what was your
my other thing? Well, and it's a little bit of a lighter note. So for how sexless these books are, there are a few scenes in which Elend and Vin wake up, and then they're surprised to find the other already dressed. There's an implication there, and the thirstier fans have noticed about, well, it's like, oh, wait, they're not that sexless. It's like, well, yeah, it's all happening off screen.
Just the fact that they share a bed?
Well, and it's more in the past book for Well of Ascension, where near the end of Well of Ascension, there was a scene where Vin and Elend were sharing a tent, and it was a very similar thing where, Elend woke up and Vin was already dressed.
When they were on the run?
Yes.
Okay.
And Spook was traveling with them, and he had a crush on Vin. And so I was like, oh, yeah, Vin, hey, all right, Spook, here, get out of town and burn your tin constantly, keep a watch out. And, in the other tent, he's like, oh, yep, he's probably aware of any sounds that are going on.
I doubt that they were having
sex.
It's
a meme. Anyway, something the thirstier fans, anyway.
So glad to end on that.
Well, if we want to end on a different note, there was something else that stuck out to me that, it's kind of a small detail. The way Sazed relearns engineering through his Copperminds, I can't tell if I like it or not because, we're both engineers, here. And in my mind, engineering is as much of a skill as it is book knowledge, right? Like, at the very least, like there's layers to the knowledge because, I might know several different methods, ways of going about tackling a problem. And there's, rather than just, oh, yeah, someone explained it to me. It's the experience, the expertise, knowing which methodology to use, what pitfalls there are. It's, engineering is a skill as much as it is knowledge.
Yeah, to me, engineering is more a way of thinking.
Right.
How you can take a problem and break it down.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if Sazed becoming an engineer by pulling it out of his Copperminds is B-Money not, being a writer and not an engineer himself, or is he or is he, subtly cluing in that, Copperminds don't just store memories, they store experiences or talents.
See, this is early enough in his career where I don't think he did like a whole lot of research. Like I don't think he talked to an engineer.
Yeah.
Before this. But at the same time, I mean, I think he kind of alluded to that because he was, even Sazed in the novel says like, right. I'm not really a genius with the engineering.
Yeah, you're just better than an average lay person.
We don't know what's in his Copperminds. He could have found like perfect
a like for like example.
Like for like example, which is how we learn at first, right?
Yes.
Like, we look at something.
Cool. Okay.
We look at something exactly similar. Like, okay, how do I modify this for my situation? And hopefully,
how do I just
there's
tweak
only
this existing solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I imagine it more like that. So it wasn't really bothering me.
Yeah. Like I said,
but I do appreciate
Brandon
taking more time to do more in-depth research about different.
I'm not even sure it's necessarily about the time. I think he just has more resources now.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway.
And the drive to do better.
Right. And yeah.
Because there's different skill sets as a writer. You need to actually be able to write, but then there's the other half of being able to understand what to be writing. And I think he was, and earlier in his career, he understandably was focusing on, well, how do I write? Yeah,
how do I tell the story I want to tell?
Right. And then going back, okay, what is this other skill set I can work on? How do I know what to say? How do I know what needs to be written?
Yeah. Okay.
Much better ending note.
Thanks. Thanks for podcasting with me, dear.
Thanks for podcasting with me.
And thank you, listener, for listening to our podcast. The next thing we're going to read is actually not Cosmere, not Brandon Sanderson. It's going to be The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie, which I think has a lot of parallels with Hero of Ages, which is why we're taking a break. The other reason is it's like my favorite book.
And you've been wanting me to read it for
a while.
Years.
Yeah. So we're going to do that next. After that, we're going to do Mistborn Secret History. And after that, we don't know yet. So if you want, you can send us feedback, comments, questions, thoughts about reading order. Blah.
No, don't.
Well, no, but what we should read next.
Oh.
What we should read next.
Yes. Okay. Yes. You're right. Sorry.
Please reach out to...
Reading order posts on Reddit just make me see red.
Our email is cosmerecasual@gmail.com or message us on Reddit, u/cosmerecasual. Our intro and outro music is licensed through Tribe of Noise. The artist is Ketsa and the song is Odyssey.
That was really quick.
I know.
And until next time, keep your wits about you, cousins.